This is Andi Purewal for Boxing Social in association with Betfred.
Boxing Social, I'm back.
Lou, you are back. It's been probably 2 years since we last did an interview in person, obviously due to the COVID and restrictions and what have you. So how are you doing, first and foremost?
I'm fine. My family's okay. Thank God. And this is the first fight card I've flown to since the pandemic. So it's started. So it's good to be back in circulation.
So you must be excited yourself to be back at a live show from the sounds of it.
I am actually. I am psyched to be back at a live show, and I think this one's sort of fun. A little bit out of the ordinary for us, but fun.
Let's get straight into it. Obviously, Amanda Serrano, your charge versus Mercado. Just firstly, where did this fight come from? Why Mercado?
We were looking for the best possible available opponent, and I offered record money, record purses, to the WBA champion Cruz Hernandez, and I offered also a six-figure package to Mogan's Pally, who is the promoter of Sarah Mahfoud. And I don't think either one of those girls, I actually frankly think both of those women are scared of Amanda Serrano. They both had excuses for not doing the fight. I was sort of shocked when we couldn't get either one of them for the kind of money we had offered. Yamaleth Mercado was the best fighter, a world champion, 4 pounds lower in weight, young, undefeated kind of champion. And we were able to make that fight, and she was the best person we could find.
What should people expect in this fight on Sunday night, and what challenges will Yamaleth pose to Amanda?
I think Amanda may very well be the best pound-for-pound female fighter in the world. I really, truly believe that. Now, Claressa Shields is a great fighter. There's not a lot of great competition or opposition for her at her weight. Katie Taylor is a great fighter. All of them belong in the debate of pound-for-pound. They're all great fighters. Those 3 women are the debate. There's nobody who punches like Amanda. There's nobody with her power. I think her versatility in the ring, her ability to knock women out with body shots, with head shots, to her knockout ratio, which is one of the greatest of all time. And, she's likely at some point before she retires a couple of years down the road to break the all-time record for most knockouts by a female. So I really think that Amanda is pound for pound, in my view, the best. And I don't think there's anyone around her weight, 22, 26, 30. I don't think there's anyone that can beat her.
Success for Amanda on Sunday, Lou. What's the next step? Is there anybody in particular who you think could well step into the ring with her?
I mean, look, she wants the opportunity that Katie has had, that Claressa has had, to be undisputed champion. So our whole agenda is as quickly as possible to get her in the ring with Erica Cruz Hernandez, to get her in the ring with Sarah Mahfoud, and get her the other 2 belts and the Ring Magazine belt. Frankly, if the other women don't want to fight her, I don't understand why Ring Magazine won't let her fight for the Ring Magazine belt or give it to her, because you can't force other people into the ring. But our agenda coming out of this fight, she'll be coming out of this fight at the end of August. There's still some time left, the remainder of this year and the first few months of next year, to try to fully unify at featherweight. And then the plan would be, as a fully unified champion, to get in the ring at Madison Square Garden in the biggest female super fight in history and do Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano as a main event at Madison Square Garden. I haven't had negotiations with Eddie. Eddie knows that we want to unify. I made it very clear to him that that's our agenda. We haven't discussed a splits or a deal for Katie or Amanda yet, because Amanda has unfinished business first. But we've agreed that at some point next year, and as soon as it's practicable, that we're going to try to get a deal done and create a super fight. And I think Madison Square Garden, with the Irish fight fans in the Northeast, they'll be traveling to the fight from everywhere, from Boston, to anywhere where there's a big Irish population. They'll be coming in. With Amanda's following, the Puerto Rican fight fans in the New York area, I think you'll have one of the biggest gates. You'll have the biggest gate in the history of women's boxing. a fight that I think will capture the imagination of the entire boxing world. So it's a fight that inevitably will happen. But first, Amanda's got to deal with Yamalith Mercado on Sunday night, and then she, it's her desire, it's her goal. She wants to be the first Puerto Rican fighter ever to have every belt. It's a legacy thing for her, and something that she's made it very clear to me that this is our shared goal, and I think she deserves it. And honestly, I think if she enters the ring as a fully unified champion against Katie, who's a fully unified champion in the biggest stage in the world, the mecca of boxing, Madison Square Garden, I think that's the kind of fight that can change women's boxing forever.
We saw at the press conference the other day how complimentary Jake Paul was of her, and it seems to be that they've got a good little relationship going on there. Can you just detail that a bit more to me, what Jake's been like with Amanda?
Well, look, I got a call out of nowhere a few months back, and it was from Steven Espinoza. And he said, Steven, Jake Paul believes in women's boxing, and he's a big fan of Amanda's. And he'd like Amanda to fight as a co-featured bout on his big pay-per-view in August. And I thought that was wonderful. I thought that was great. But then watching, they trained together. Amanda went down to Puerto Rico, and Jake now lives in Puerto Rico and trains there. Amanda went down to his training camp. They spent some time in the gym together. And look, I'm impressed by Jake Paul's desire to elevate boxing in general. I think he cares about the sport. I think he's taking it seriously. I don't care what purists want to say in terms of hate and criticism. The guy's been in the gym for a couple of years, working nonstop to better himself as a fighter. He's making an effort to elevate women's boxing. He wants to see fair pay for fighters in boxing, particularly women. I mean, look, Jay came to me. He wanted to make sure, his people wanted to make sure, Nikisa, who works for him, they made it very clear, we want to do a deal. We want Amanda to make her highest payday. We want her opponent to make her highest payday. And we want to know that the women are being paid fairly. So I was transparent about the economics of the entire fight. But I thought the fact that he was taking that point of view was not only refreshing, but an indication that he respects the sport, he respects the fighters who sacrifice so much and risk so much in our very unforgiving sport of boxing. And look, man, people can think what they want about the guy, but I'm impressed by his work ethic. I'm impressed by his desire to be better himself in the ring, and I'm impressed by his desire to try to make the sport better, particularly with an eye toward fairness toward women and making women's playing field a little bit more equal and certainly fairer. And you know what, man, power to him for that. I mean, I'm rooting for Jake Paul until I think that this guy's not good for boxing, and I think he is good for boxing. I'm team Jake Paul.
So his fight with Tyron Woodley on Sunday night, what are you expecting from that?
I think that Woodley, I followed Woodley a little bit. I mean, because it's bizarre after my very contentious interview many years ago with Joe Rogan, but I actually become something of an MMA fan, more of an MMA fan, and I watch a lot of the UFC stuff. Woodley, most of Woodley's game was sort of on the ground and grappling and wrestling and whatever. I think he improved himself as a stand-up fighter, but Jake's done nothing but train as a stand-up fighter. I mean, Jake's been full-time boxing training now for years. And forget about who he's fought. I've seen improvements in his technique and his punching power from fight to fight to fight. So I favor Jake Paul to win the fight, likely by knockout. But if it goes to a decision, I just think Jake Paul has an advantage as a stand-up fighter who's more dedicated to the boxing game as opposed to Woodley's, concentration, which has been more on MMA.
Just with Jake moving forwards, and a final question on him before we come back to your fighters. I think the one thing in particular where he has received criticism is calling out the likes of Canelo Alvarez, the man who many consider the pound-for-pound star of the sport. What are your thoughts on Jake's intentions or wanting to face somebody like a Canelo?
His brother fought Mayweather. It was an exhibition. Look, if Jake keeps winning, He's not going to beat Canelo Alvarez. He's never fucking going to beat Canelo Alvarez, and I think he knows he's never going to beat Canelo Alvarez. But you know what, man? Like, he's a boxer. If you don't want to believe that, don't believe it. But he's now a boxer. He's full-time working out with a guy like a B.J. Flores, who I know for years, who was a real good boxing guy, was a hell of a fighter himself, is a pretty good trainer. He's in a boxing gym all the time. He's sparring professional prize fighters. He's a boxer, and he hasn't lost yet. And him calling out or naming the biggest names in the sport may strike some as funny, or may strike some as some form of disrespect. But it's sort of, he's a fighter. And he's allowed to dream like every other fighter is allowed to dream. And by the way, if he keeps winning and gets better, at some point maybe he has that exhibition with Canelo, and enough people want to see it that it's a huge event. And if that happens, power to him. Dude, I'm not getting upset by anybody calling anybody out or naming any names. He also named Tommy Fury's name. Tommy Fury's no Canelo, you know. I mean, he mentioned other names, and he mentioned Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor is no Canelo. Do I think Conor McGregor against Jake Paul would be a big fight? Hell yeah. Hell yeah, it'd be a big fight. And look, Tommy Fury's still a Fury. And all those gypsy guys are fighting men. They are. And, you know, and do I think that fight would have some attraction? Yeah, probably would. He's called out a lot of names. He's put his list on a blackboard. I've seen it. I mean, he's having some fun too, man. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't see any way in which Jake Paul right now is bad for boxing. I don't see any way in which he's showing the sport anything but respect. I really don't. And boxing's problems are self-imposed. Jake Paul and Logan Paul are the least of boxing's problems. Our problems and the things we need to fix, we've done to ourselves. We have not moved into the 21st century appropriately with respect to regulating our sport appropriately, health and safety. We haven't cleaned up judging. We haven't cleaned up ratings organizations or rankings. You know, we have work to do to fix our own sport. The people that are spending their time criticizing Jake Paul should think otherwise.
Lou, just move forwards and with your guys, Ivan Baranchyk, how important is it that he looks good on Sunday night and in what is a tough test with Montana Love?
I think it's very important that he looks good. I think it's very important that he looks good. He's coming off a fight of the year, but one in which he was knocked out pretty brutally. Montana Love is a good fighter. It's a absolute test. Ivan is the bigger puncher. Ivan is the more physically imposing kind of fighter. But Ivan likes to get hit in the ring. He just seems to enjoy it. He likes those kind of fights. He likes wars. He makes wars. And Love is more of a boxer. So I don't think it's an easy fight, but I think it's the kind of fight that propels the winner to probably a world title shot.
Lou, going to pick that back up there. Obviously, she's had some business to take care of. We was talking about Ivan Baranchyk, and provided Sunday goes to plan, what's next? We was touching on the world champions in Gervonta Davis, Josh Taylor. What do you think is next? What does Ivan want?
Ivan wants to fight regularly, assuming everything goes well and he wins. Ivan wants to fight regularly and he wants to fight big fights. I asked him specifically today, is there one person you want to target? Is there one direction, you know, after this fight, if you win, that you want to go? He said, I'm a fighter, I'll fight. You tell me who to fight. You guys tell me who to fight. I'll be there to fight them. I thought his fight with Josh Taylor, I thought he fought really well. He was fighting on complete, a hometown advantage for Josh in Glasgow. He also didn't know that he was fighting for certain in Scotland until a month before the fight. And he wasn't, so no excuses. Josh Taylor's a great fighter and certainly a top 10 pound for pound guy. But no excuses, but I don't think Ivan was his best in that fight. I think Ivan's a problem for anybody at 140 with his punching power. He's a killer, be killed kind of guy. I mean, he throws bombs. He likes to mix it up. He's one of the most exciting fighters in all of boxing. So I think that there are a lot of possibilities for him. But you know what? You can't look past Montana Love. Very skilled boxer, very tough fight. And also, in addition to Amanda Serrano on this card and Ivan Baranchyk fighting Montana Love, also, I think a kid who may very well be the most unsung but best 154-pounder in the world, Charles Conwell, is on the undercard fighting an undefeated Mexican kid. I think that Charles is a tremendous talent. He's from Cleveland, where we are right now. This is a hometown fight for him. He'll be fighting the last fight before the pay-per-view begins in front of a hometown crowd, in front of the biggest audience he's ever fought at in his hometown. So I think it's a great opportunity for Charles to get exposure. But I also think Charles is one of the up-and-coming young stars in boxing.
Lou, just moving forward, there's a couple of other topics I want to get your thoughts on because we have run slightly over now. George Kambosos Jr. obviously getting ready for that Teofimo Lopez fight. I just wanted to get an update from yourself where things stand. Obviously, we know that IBF made the mandatory vaccine declaration, shall we go with, the other day? Just kind of get an update from yourself.
Yeah, the phone ringing was relating to that topic. That's why I had to jump off for a second, and that's why people, when they listen to this interview, will hear the phone ringing in the background for another answer I gave. But the reason that the IBF actually issued that, it wasn't just the IBF trying to be the COVID police. The reason they issued that is New York City issued an ordinance that requires at least one vaccine in order for a fighter to compete in a sport that's going to keep him within 6 feet of his, other competitor or competitors. So if you're fighting in a sport where you can stay 6 feet apart, you don't need the vaccination if you're not a New York City resident, which obviously George and at this point Teofimo are not New York City residents. But you're obviously fighting in a sport that you're going to be fighting within 6 feet. So based upon that, you need at least one vaccine. The other issue is the vaccines, not all the vaccines that are available in Australia are acceptable in the US, and the same is true vice versa. The predominant vaccine in Australia is AstraZeneca. The AstraZeneca is not recognized in the United States. If George were to come to the United States and have one shot and got the Johnson & Johnson's not recognized in Australia. So, but there's, we're going to deal with that. Both fighters, because of the New York City requirement, are required now by the IBF to be vaccinated, and both will be vaccinated. And I believe the fight will happen, as Triller has stated, on October 5th at the Hulu Theater at Madison Square Garden. And, finally, and I think that that'll be a fun night for boxing fans also.
Someone was going to say, you just said finally there, Lou. How frustrating a period has this been for George to have missed out on the original date because of Teofimo unfortunately testing positive for COVID back then? Excuse me.
I hope you don't have the
COVID. No, thankfully no.
Otherwise, maybe you should put the mask back on. Right?
I might have
We're
to.
sitting here within 6 feet. Were you vaccinated?
I have been, yes.
You have been vaccinated.
Yes.
Good, I'm glad you
Lou,
if you cough again, put the fucking mask on.
Lou, obviously just moving forward, like I said, with that, how frustrating a period has this been for George, and how excited is he to finally, hopefully get into the ring with Teofimo and contest the undisputed lightweight belts?
Look, it's been very frustrating for him, and honestly, he's not going to blow this opportunity or blow this fight. But his wife's about to give birth at the end of the month, and he never thought for a moment that would be sort of an issue. He believed he'd be able to be there with his wife and family when she's about to give birth to, I think, to his third child. But with an October 5th date, he's going to have to miss the birth of his child. Look, it's not ideal, but the one thing we've learned through COVID is that there's not a lot of control over things, and shit happens. And Teofimo got COVID, and there was not much anyone could do about it. And George is going to do what he needs to do to not give up the biggest opportunity of his professional life, and then he can go celebrate with his family and meet his new child shortly after he fights Lopez.
And Lou, I just want to get your thoughts on this past weekend. Manny Pacquiao, your Pacquiao-Ugas, potentially the last time we see Manny Pacquiao in the ring. Just get your thoughts on the fight first and foremost, though. What did you make of it?
It's funny, when they substituted Ugas in, I like Ugas. I promoted a few of his fights when I was working with PBC. He's a skilled boxer. I love guys that come back from adversity. He had a 15-3 record. It was ready to step away from boxing, and came back and went on a tear. The only loss he had on that tear was to Sean Porter, and I love Sean Porter, but that fight could have gone either way. I knew it was a tough, proposition for Manny. and a different style probably than he was preparing for, though I don't think Errol Spence would have been a day. Honestly, with the Manny I saw in the ring that night, I don't think would have beaten Errol Spence either. But I still thought Manny fought like the warrior he's always been. Manny's one of the greatest fighters that's ever put on a pair of gloves. Certainly a GOAT, as we say. I mean, literally one of the best who's ever done it. Ugas changed his life with a great performance. He had a brilliant game plan and he executed it perfectly. I've said previously I thought Manny, for the first time, Manny said his legs weren't 100, but I think that was the first time I really saw where Manny looked older in the ring. I don't think he has a lot of fights left in him if he's not going to retire. If he retires with the respect and love of an entire sport and industry of boxing. He's been one of the great ambassadors for boxing worldwide. But if he wants to fight again, he's Manny Pacquiao, and that's his prerogative. I don't know if he would ever want to fight again in the Philippines and have a going-away fight, or if he wants a rematch with Ugas. Manny's earned the right to do whatever the hell he wants right now in boxing, whether it's walk away or continue. He's earned that right. And despite his being in the 40s, he's looked like a champion even into his 40s. So I got nothing but love and respect for Manny.
Right, Lou, we will leave that there now, and I'll leave you to enjoy the rest of your day. It's been a pleasure to catch up with you for the first time in a long time. Thank you for speaking to me and Boxing Social.
Always good to be talked about Boxing Social. Always good to see you.